Let me tell you something about myself before I tell you anything else. I am not the kind of man who walks into a room and commands it. I do not dress to be noticed. I do not speak to be applauded. I do not post photographs of my life on the internet for strangers to validate. And I do not measure my worth by the number of people who turn their heads when I enter a space. I drive a car that is clean and reliable, and completely unremarkable. I live in an apartment that is comfortable and well organized, and located in a building with no doorman, no rooftop pool, no Instagram-worthy lobby. I wear watches that tell time. I eat at restaurants where the food is good, rather than restaurants where the tables are impossible to book. I have never once in my adult life purchased anything for the purpose of impressing someone else. My name is Daniel Cruz. I am 34 years old. I built a software infrastructure company from a single laptop on a second-hand desk in a studio apartment when I was 26. And over 8 years I grew it into something that, by the time this story begins, was in the final stages of being acquired by one of the largest technology firms in the country, for a number I am not going to state outright, because numbers have a way of becoming the whole story, when they should only be a detail. What matters is not the number. What matters is that I built something real, something that worked, something I was genuinely proud of. And I did it quietly, the same way I did everything, because I have always believed that the work speaks, and the man behind it does not need to. The people who needed to know, knew. Everyone else, including, as it turned out, the woman I had intended to spend my life with, did not. That was my choice. I stand by it. I would make it again. But choices have consequences, and consequences have a way of arriving at unexpected hours. And this particular consequence arrived at 2 in the morning on a Saturday, through a phone call from a woman named Cassie, who was crying so hard I could barely understand what she was saying. But I am getting ahead of myself. Let me start where it started. I met Elena Vasquez at a mutual friend's dinner party 3 years before any of this happened. And from the first conversation, I understood that she was the kind of woman who filled a room the way certain music fills a room, completely, immediately, with a quality that made everything else slightly quieter by comparison. She was beautiful in a way that she was fully aware of and had carefully cultivated, which is not a criticism. Awareness of your own beauty and what it does to people is simply information, and intelligent people use information. Elena was intelligent. She was also funny, occasionally sharp, deeply social, and possessed of a laugh that could make a table of strangers feel like old friends in 30 seconds. I was, by all observable evidence, not her type. Her previous relationships, which I learned about gradually, in the offhand way people share their histories, had been with men who occupied space loudly, a finance director with a corner office, and a company card he used creatively, a minor local celebrity, the kind of person whose face appeared on billboards, and who considered this an adequate substitute for a personality, a venture capitalist who took her to Cannes and posted the photographs, men who looked impressive from the outside, which was where Elena did most of her looking. I was not any of those things. What I was present, attentive, honest, reliable in the specific way that reliability is only visible over time. The kind that shows up, follows through, remembers what you said 3 weeks ago, and asks about it. I was not exciting in any of the surface ways. I was interesting in the slower, deeper ways that require patience to appreciate. Elena, I would eventually understand, was not a patient person, but in the beginning she was enchanted by what she called my mystery. "You're different," she told me on our 4th date, over dinner at a quiet Italian place I loved. You're not performing anything. You're just there." "I'm just me," I said. "Exactly," she said. Like that was the most extraordinary thing. I should have understood, in that moment, that what she found fascinating about me was the novelty of it, that she had never encountered someone who simply existed without performing, and that novelty and genuine appreciation are not the same thing, and that one of them fades. I didn't understand it then. I was in love with her. Love has a way of making you a slightly less accurate reader of situations. We dated for a year before I asked her to move in. Another year before I proposed. I proposed simply, dinner, just us. A ring that was beautiful rather than ostentatious. A question asked quietly, across a table in the same Italian restaurant where she had told me I wasn't performing anything. She said yes immediately, with tears in her eyes that looked real because they were real. And I believed in that moment that we had built something that would hold. The engagement lasted 8 months before it ended, not because of a single catastrophic event, not because of a betrayal or a revelation, or a dramatic blow-up. It ended because of the slow, accumulated pressure of a woman who was beginning to see her life through the eyes of other people. And the other people were not impressed. Her friends, that is where it started. That is always, in my experience, where it starts. Elena's closest friends were women she had known since college, a group of 5 who called themselves, without irony, the Circle. They had a group chat. They had annual trips. They had opinions about each other's lives that they delivered with the confidence of people who had confused closeness with authority. The ringleader, though she would have rejected that word, and substituted something more flattering, was a woman named Brittany Holloway, who worked in luxury real estate, drove a car that announced her income before she opened her mouth, and had appointed herself the aesthetic and romantic standard-bearer for the entire group. Brittany had married well at 28, divorced strategically at 31, and was currently dating a man 12 years her senior, who owned 3 restaurants and wore his money like a second skin. Brittany did not like me from the first meeting. I could see it clearly, that particular assessment that certain people perform in the first 30 seconds. The quick scan that catalogs what you're wearing, what you drive, how you carry yourself, and renders a verdict before you've finished your first sentence. She shook my hand, said it was lovely to meet me, and spent the rest of the dinner asking Elena questions about her career that were designed to be overheard. The others followed Brittany's lead. They always did. At first, Elena defended me in the way that people defend choices they are still confident in. He's private. He's building something serious. He's not the type to show off. I know she said these things because she told me she said them in those early months, with a kind of pride that I found both touching and slightly concerning, because the fact that she was defending me implied there was something to defend against, which implied the prosecution was already underway. But as the months went on, something shifted. The defenses became shorter. The reports from group dinners became vaguer. Elena started looking at things differently, at our apartment, at my car, at our social life, with a new kind of measuring eye, the eye of someone who was benchmarking against external standards and finding gaps. She started mentioning things, small things at first. Brittany's boyfriend just got a table at Solaire. Apparently, you basically need to know someone. A pause, then, have you ever been? No, I said. A small silence, not long enough to be a conversation, just long enough to register. Then bigger things. Cassie's new guy just got promoted to VP. He's taking her to Santorini. Then, Derek just got featured in that business magazine. The one with the, you know the one. Amanda said it made such an impression at her office. Good for Derek, I said, and I meant it. Elena looked at me with an expression I had not seen before, something between frustration and bewilderment, like I had given the wrong answer to a question I hadn't known was a test. I didn't take the bait, not because I was playing a game, but because the bait was beneath me, and I knew it, and I could not make myself pretend otherwise. This, I think, is what finally broke her. Not that I was unimpressive, but that I refused to be impressed by the things she needed me to be impressed by, that I would not compete, that I would not perform, that I met every subtle pressure with the same unhurried stillness, and she could not find a crack in it, and that stillness, which she had once called my mystery, had become, to her, evidence of limitation. She had mistaken my calm for complacency, my privacy for poverty, my refusal to perform for an inability to deliver, and her friends had helped her make that mistake. It happened on a Sunday evening in October. We had spent the afternoon separately, she with the Circle, me at my home office, where I had been on a call with my legal team about the acquisition, which was entering its final stages and required my complete and focused attention. She came home at 7, still carrying the energy of wherever she had been, a particular charged quality, the residue of a conversation that hadn't finished. I was in the kitchen. I had made dinner, simple but good, pasta from scratch, a salad, a bottle of wine I knew she liked. The apartment smelled warm. I had set the table properly, because I liked things done properly. She set her bag down and looked at the table, and then looked at me, and her expression did something complicated. How was it? I asked. Fine. She sat at the table, but she didn't settle. She sat the way people sit when they are still in the conversation they left. We went to that rooftop place, the one Brittany loves. Was it good? It was fine. She poured herself a glass of water. We talked about the wedding. Good things, I hope. A pause, she looked at the table. Then she looked at me directly, which Elena did when she had decided to say something, and had committed to saying it. They have concerns, she said. I put down the spoon I was holding. Your friends have concerns about our wedding. About us. She kept her eyes on me. They think, Brittany thinks, and the others agree, that I could be making a more, she searched for the word, ambitious choice. Ambitious, I repeated. They think you're not, she stopped, started again. They said that for someone like me, with my profile and my network, and where I want to be in 5 years, I should be with someone who is more. Elena, my voice was quiet, very quiet. Say it plainly. She met my eyes, and she said it. My friends think you're not impressive enough for me, that I should be aiming higher. The kitchen was very quiet. The pasta was on the stove. The wine was open. The table was set for two properly, the way I always set it, because I liked things done right. I looked at the woman I had chosen, the woman I had proposed to in the restaurant where she had called me real, the woman I had built a life alongside for 3 years, and I watched her hold my gaze with the expression of someone who believed that what she had just said was a reasonable thing to say to the man she was engaged to. And I understood in that moment, with a clarity that was almost peaceful, that this was not about her friends. Her friends had said the words she was already thinking. They had simply given her permission to say them out loud. Then go ahead, I said. She blinked. What? Aim higher. I picked up the spoon. I stirred the pasta. If that's what you believe, then go ahead. Daniel, I'm not going to argue with you about my own value, Elena. I never have. I'm not going to start now. I'm not saying I believe. You said your friends think it. You sat across from me and repeated it. You didn't say, my friends said something ridiculous today. You didn't say, they were completely wrong and I told them so. I set the spoon down again. You delivered it. That's a different thing. She was quiet. Eat, I said. The pasta is ready. We ate, in the particular silence of two people who have said something that cannot be unsaid and are pretending, for the duration of a meal, that it is still possible to unsay it. She went to bed early. I stayed at the table with my wine and I made a list. Not an emotional list, not a list of grievances or regrets. A practical list. The venue, the caterer, the photographer, the florist, the hotel room block, the invitations that had not yet been sent, the ring, my grandmother's ring, which I had had reset for Elena, and which Elena wore every day, and which belonged in my family. I made the list, and then I went to bed. And the next morning, while Elena was at work, I began making calls. I want to be clear about something. I did not cancel the wedding to punish her. I did not do it as a tactic, or a bluff, or a negotiating position. I did not do it hoping she would call me, panicked, and ask me to stop. I did it because she had said what she said, and I had heard it clearly. And when someone tells you, however it is framed, however carefully it is dressed up in the language of other people's opinions, that you are not enough, the only dignified response is to believe them and act accordingly. I am a man who believes what people show me. It has saved me a great deal of time. The venue was first. The coordinator was professional and sympathetic. These calls happened more often than people thought, she told me, which I believed. I lost the deposit. I did not care. The caterer next, then the photographer, who was surprisingly understanding, and offered to transfer a portion of the deposit to a future booking, which I declined politely. The florist, the small band I had booked for the reception, 4 musicians who played standards, and who I had genuinely been looking forward to. The hotel room block was released. The ceremony officiant was notified. The invitations, the beautiful, heavy cream invitations that were stacked in a box in my office closet, not yet mailed, went into a bag for recycling. And the ring, Elena came home that evening to find it on the kitchen counter, beside a note that said, "This was my grandmother's. I'd like to have it back. D." She called me 4 times that night. I was at a hotel, a good one because I saw no reason to make myself uncomfortable, just because I was also making myself unavailable. And I watched her name appear on my screen 4 times, and did not answer. She texted, "Daniel, what is this? Call me." She texted, "Are you serious right now?" She texted, "I didn't say I agreed with them. I was telling you what they said." She texted, "Daniel, please." I put my phone face down on the nightstand, and slept without difficulty, which might sound cold, but was in fact simply the sleep of a man who had made a decision he was at peace with. The next morning I texted back, "I heard you clearly, Elena. I hope you find what you're looking for. Take care of yourself." She called immediately. I did not answer. She called again. I did not answer. She texted, "You are being completely irrational. We need to talk about this like adults." I put my phone in my jacket pocket and went to my morning meeting about the acquisition, which was proceeding exactly on schedule and which required my full attention. The 2 weeks that followed were, from the outside, perfectly quiet. I moved my essential things out of our shared apartment while Elena was at work. Not dramatically, not all at once, but in 2 clean, organized trips, taking only what was mine, leaving everything shared in place without dispute. I did not want the apartment. I had my own space waiting, the one I had kept throughout our relationship because I was a private person who needed a room that was entirely his own. And Elena had always found this slightly suspicious, which should perhaps have told me something. I settled back into my own space. I worked. The acquisition was entering its final, most intensive phase, and the work was consuming in the best possible way. The kind of consuming that leaves no room for anything else, that pulls your entire mind into the present tense, and makes everything outside the work feel slightly distant and theoretical. I did not think about Elena constantly. I thought about her the way you think about a chapter you have finished, with a kind of clear-eyed recognition that it was real, that it mattered, that it is genuinely over. I did not tell people. I did not call friends to process it. I did not post anything, which was consistent with the way I had never posted anything. I simply moved forward with the steady, unhurried pace that was my natural speed. Elena, I gathered from the silence, was not moving at my pace. She called 3 more times in the first week, each time without leaving a voicemail, which told me she was not ready to say what needed to be said, and was hoping I would answer and say it for her. I did not answer. She sent 1 more text on day 9. I returned the ring to your building's front desk. I told them it was a delivery for you. I hope you're okay. I texted back, thank you, take care. That was the last contact we had. On day 13, I got a call from my lawyer. The acquisition documents were finalized. The deal would close in 48 hours. My company, 8 years of work, built from a laptop on a second-hand desk, was about to become something different, and I was about to become something different along with it. I sat in my office for a moment after the call and thought about that. Then I went back to work. Across the city, in a part of it I was no longer a part of, Elena Vasquez was doing what people do when they need the world to validate their choices. She was moving on loudly. I did not know the details at the time. I pieced them together later, from Cassie's account, from things that were mentioned, from the specific shape of what happened on that Saturday night. What I know is this. Within 10 days of our ending, Elena was already being seen publicly with a man named Rowan Fitch, who was everything I was not, aesthetically speaking. He was in commercial real estate, loud about it, with a social media presence that documented his life in an unbroken stream of evidence. The restaurant tables, the weekend trips, the bottle service, the events, the network. He was handsome in an obvious way, and charming in a louder way, and he wore his ambition on the outside where everyone could see it and appreciate it. Brittany, I was told later, was delighted. The rest of the circle followed. They approved of Rowan Fitch in the way they had never quite approved of me, because Rowan Fitch made sense to them immediately, without requiring patience or attention or the willingness to look beneath the surface. He was a surface, a good one, polished and reflective. Elena moved through those 2 weeks in a blaze of forward momentum, doing what she had always been good at, performing happiness so convincingly that it almost became real. The bachelorette party was not hers. It was Brittany's, a belated celebration for a recent anniversary, repurposed into a night out for the circle, a private room at one of the city's most fashionable bars. Bottle service, the works. Elena went as a member of the group and as a woman who had, according to her own narrative, just made an upgrade. She went to celebrate, she went to be seen, she went to be the woman who had aimed higher and landed somewhere better. I know what happened next because Cassie told me. All of it, in that 2 a.m. phone call that I will never, as long as I live, entirely forget. The evening had been going well by its own standards. The room was good, the drinks were strong, the music was right. Brittany was in her element, holding court at the head of the table with the particular energy of a woman who considers a night out a performance, and performs it brilliantly. Elena was beside her, laughing, dressed in something that had taken her an hour to select, looking exactly like someone who had recently made an upgrade and wanted the world to take note. The conversation was doing what the conversation in such groups always does, moving through relationships, through men, through the comparative assessment of choices. Brittany's husband, Cassie's new situation, and then, inevitably, the recent news. Daniel Cruz, said Amanda, who was scrolling her phone with the casual attention of someone who was half in the room and half somewhere else. Wait, is that your Daniel? Elena looked over. What? Hang on. Amanda's eyebrows moved upward. There's a profile in TechAxis, just posted today. She turned the phone around. Is this him? Elena looked at the screen. She saw his face. The same calm, unremarkable face she had looked at across 3 years of dinners. The face she had last seen over a plate of pasta he had made from scratch. The face of the man she had told, in those exact words, was not impressive enough. She took the phone. She read. The room did not go quiet immediately. It went quiet the way a fire goes out, from the edges first, spreading inward, as each woman registered what was happening and what it meant. The article was not long. It did not need to be. It was a profile of the acquisition, a concise, factual account of what Daniel Cruz had built, what it was worth, and what the deal represented in the context of the industry. There were numbers in it, clear numbers in plain text, not hidden behind jargon or qualifications. There were also quotes from people whose names the women in that room recognized. Names that carried weight. Names that called him, in the plain language of people who did not give praise casually, one of the most disciplined and genuinely accomplished builders of his generation. A man who had, by deliberate choice, kept his profile so low that even people adjacent to his industry had barely heard of him. A man who had valued substance so completely over appearance that he had become extraordinary in near total silence. Brittany leaned over Elena's shoulder and read it. Once, her face did something that none of them had ever seen it do before. It went still, not the controlled stillness of composure, the stillness of a woman who has just looked at a scoreboard and realized she had been calling the wrong team the winner. He never said anything, Amanda said quietly. She was still holding her phone, still staring at the screen like she expected the words to rearrange themselves into something less damaging. No, Elena said. Her voice had gone flat. He never did. Why wouldn't he say something? Amanda asked, genuinely confused, turning the phone over in her hands like the answer might be on the back of it. Nobody answered, because the answer required an understanding of a kind of man that none of them, with the possible exception of Cassie, had previously encountered or made space to understand. The kind of man who does not say something because he does not need to, because the work exists whether or not you announce it, because your value is not contingent on being recognized by people who are not looking carefully enough. Elena sat with the phone in her hands, and the world rearranged itself around her with the slow, sickening movement of tectonic plates. Not dramatic, not loud, but absolute and permanent. She had looked at this man. She had looked at him across 3 years and across a dinner table, and across the question of what kind of future she was choosing. And she had let other people tell her what she was seeing, and what they had told her was wrong. And she had believed them anyway. The room was very quiet now. Elena, Cassie said. Elena put the phone down on the table. She picked up her glass. She set it down again without drinking. She pushed her chair back. I'll be back, she said. She went to the bathroom. She did not come back. Cassie gave her 20 minutes. She knew Elena. She knew that 20 minutes was the boundary between giving someone space and letting them drown in it. She had been Elena's closest friend since their second year of college, which meant she had sat with her through the finance director and the billboard man and the venture capitalist, and she had also sat with her through the good things, the real things, the moments when Elena was not performing anything and was simply herself, which was a woman that Cassie loved and worried about in equal measure. She had liked Daniel Cruz. She had liked him from the beginning, which had put her in the minority, and had kept her quieter than she should have been in the months when the group was building its case against him. She had told herself it was not her place, that Elena had to make her own choices. That friendship meant support, not intervention. She had been telling herself a version of this story for long enough that she had almost believed it. But sitting in that private room with a phone displaying the truth, and a best friend locked in a bathroom, something in Cassie broke open. She stepped out of the private room. She found a quiet corner of the bar, near a window that looked out onto the street below. She pulled up Daniel's number. She had it from the years of group events and logistics, the kind of number you keep in your phone without thinking about it. She looked at it for a long moment. Then she called. It rang twice. Cassie. His voice was awake, alert, not surprised in the way that 2 a.m. calls usually surprised people. Like he kept himself available for the world on his own terms. She opened her mouth to say something organized, and found nothing organized available. What came out instead was the truth, unfiltered. I need you to listen to me. Her voice was already breaking. We Googled you tonight, and she doesn't know I'm calling. She's been in the bathroom for 40 minutes, and she won't come out. She pressed her free hand against her face. She just keeps saying she didn't know. And she stopped, started again. I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Ask, he said. The word was so simple, so direct. No preamble, no deflection, just ask. She had forgotten, she realized, how he talked. How he never used 2 words where one would do, and never used 1 word when silence was the right answer. Did you know she would do this? Cassie asked. Is that why you never told her? About the company, about the deal. Did you know, and were you testing her? The pause was long enough to make her hold her breath. No, he said finally. Then why didn't you tell her? I told her I was building something. I told her it was going well. I told her it mattered to me, and that I was proud of it. Another pause. She asked me once what I thought it would be worth when it was done. I told her I didn't want to speculate on numbers before the deal was real, because I didn't want to be the kind of man who puts value on things before they've earned it. A breath. She said that was a very Daniel answer and changed the subject. Cassie closed her eyes, because she remembered Elena saying that. She remembered Elena rolling her eyes slightly, with a fondness that had been eroding at the edges. She thought you were small, Cassie said. The word hurt coming out. I know, he said. She was wrong. Yes. Daniel, her voice cracked completely. I should have said something. When Brittany was. When Amanda was agreeing with everything Brittany said without stopping to think for herself. She stopped. I thought it wasn't my place. I told myself Elena had to decide for herself. But the truth is I was afraid of Brittany. And I let my friend make the worst decision of her life. And I said nothing, and I am so. Cassie, his voice was not unkind. It was firm in the way of someone redirecting you back to solid ground. This was not your fault. I could have. You could have, he said. But Elena is a grown woman, and she made a grown woman's choice. She said what she said. She didn't stumble into it. She sat across from me and delivered a verdict and waited to see what I would do. A pause. Now she knows. She's devastated, Cassie said. I know. She's been in that bathroom for 40 minutes. She hasn't touched her phone. She's just... Cassie looked toward the corridor. I've never seen her like this. She'll be okay, he said, and he said it with a certainty that was not cold, just clear. She's strong when she needs to be. You know that better than I do. Are you okay? Cassie asked, because she suddenly needed to know, because it had not occurred to any of them until this moment to ask that question. The pause this time was different, shorter. I'm good, he said, and something in the way he said it, not performed, not brave, just factually accurate, made Cassie believe it completely. She's going to want to call you, Cassie said. I know. Will you answer? The pause this time was the longest. I told her everything that mattered, he said. She just decided it wasn't enough. That was her decision to make, and she made it. He paused one final time. What happens now is hers to decide, too. Cassie stood in the quiet corner of the bar with the city blinking outside the window. And she felt, with the full weight of it, the specific grief of watching someone realize too late what they had in their hands. Thank you for answering, she said. Take care of her tonight, he said. She needs her friend. He hung up. Cassie stood there for another minute. Then she squared her shoulders and went to find Elena. She knocked twice. Elle, her voice was quiet. It's me. A long pause, then the click of a lock. Elena was sitting on the closed lid of the toilet with her back straight and her arms wrapped around herself, which was the specific posture she used when she was holding herself together through physical will rather than emotional resolution. Her makeup had held. It always held. She bought the good kind. But her eyes were the eyes of someone who had been crying without letting themselves actually cry, which was a particular torture. Cassie came in and sat on the edge of the counter and looked at her best friend. I called him, she said. Elena looked up. What? I called Daniel just now. Cassie, I needed to. She met Elena's eyes. I needed to ask him something. Elena's jaw was tight. What did he say? He said, Cassie considered how to give this back accurately, because accuracy was what this moment required, not management. He said he told you everything that mattered, that you decided it wasn't enough. Elena looked at the wall. Her throat moved. He's not angry, Cassie said. That's worse, Elena said. Her voice was very quiet. Angry I could understand. Angry means it still matters enough to... She stopped. He's just done. Yes. Because I told him to be. She pressed her fingers against her mouth. I sat at a table with dinner he made, and I told him my friends thought he wasn't impressive enough. And I said it like I was just passing along information. Like it was neutral, like I wasn't... Her voice fractured. Like I wasn't saying it because some part of me had started to believe it. Cassie said nothing, because there was nothing to say that would soften it. And Elena didn't need softening. She needed the truth, and the truth was already in the room. 3 years, Elena said. He made dinner from scratch. He remembered every single thing I ever told him about anything. He never made me feel small, Cassie. Not once in 3 years. And I sat there and I made him feel... She stopped. You didn't make him feel small, Cassie said carefully. I don't think you can. Elena looked at her. That's what I understood tonight, Cassie said, about the kind of man he is. He's not small. He was never small. You were looking for something that looked a certain way, and he didn't look that way, and you let that be the whole answer. Elena was quiet for a long time. Brittany kept saying, Brittany, Cassie said, and her voice was measured and final, is a woman who values the packaging more than anything in the package. And Amanda goes along with whatever Brittany decides, because she has never once in the 10 years I have known her formed an independent opinion about anything that mattered. She paused. And I love them both in the way you love people you've known long enough that the history is inseparable from the feeling. But I have been letting Brittany set the standard for this whole group for 10 years, and Amanda has been her echo for just as long. And tonight I realized that the standard they set cost you something real. She looked at her friend directly. I should have said something. I'm sorry I didn't. It wasn't your job to. It was my job as your friend, Cassie said. I knew I liked him. I knew there was something different about him, something worth keeping, and I said nothing because I didn't want to make waves. She exhaled. I'm done not making waves. Elena looked at her hands. The left one, without the ring that had been his grandmother's, looked unfamiliar. Can I fix it? She asked. The question was so small, so unlike Elena, who was not usually a woman who asked whether things were possible before she tried them. Cassie thought about what Daniel had said. What happens now is hers to decide, too. I don't know, she said honestly. I think that depends on you, on what you actually want, and whether you want it because it's real, or because you're scared of having been wrong. Elena looked up. Because those are different things, Cassie said, and he will know the difference. He always does, Elena said softly, and in her voice was the specific grief of someone who has just fully understood a thing that they should have understood much earlier. I need to be clear, Elena did call. She called the next morning at 10, which told me she had not slept. I looked at her name on my screen for long enough that most people would have considered it deliberate. Then I answered, Daniel. Her voice had none of its usual architecture. No performance, no management, no careful selection of angle. She sounded like herself, which was the version of her I had loved most and seen least toward the end. Elena, I said. I don't, she stopped. I'm not going to ask you to come back. I don't think that's another stop. I just needed you to hear me say that I was wrong, that what I said was wrong, that I let people who loved me but did not see clearly make the most important decision of my life, and I handed it to them, and I don't have an excuse for that. I sat with the silence for a moment. I know you don't, I said. I'm not asking for anything, she said. I needed to say it to you directly, not through Cassie, not through a text. You deserve to hear it from me. Thank you, I said, and I meant it, because an honest accounting, delivered without agenda, is one of the rarest things one person can give another, and I recognized it for what it was. Were you ever going to tell me, she asked, about the company, about how big it was becoming? When the deal closed, I said, I was going to take you to dinner, the Italian place, and I was going to tell you everything. She was quiet for a long time. That would have been a very good dinner, she said finally. Yes, I said, it would have been. Another silence, the kind that sits between two people who have loved each other and are now on opposite sides of a decision that cannot be undone. Are you going to be okay? She asked. I already am, I said. I heard her breath on the line, steady but only just. Good, she said. That's good. Elena, I kept my voice even. You are going to be okay too. Not immediately, but you will be. You are not a woman who stays broken. I broke something real, she said. Yes, and I can't fix it. No. Okay, the word was very small. Okay, we said goodbye without drama, without tears, at least on my end, without the kind of final statements that people make when they want the last word to redeem the whole conversation. Just goodbye, take care, I mean it. I hung up. I sat in my office in the quiet of a Saturday morning, the city doing its slow weekend business outside the window, the acquisition paperwork on my desk, the next chapter already beginning whether I was ready or not. I was ready. The deal closed on a Tuesday. There was no party, no announcement on my end, no celebration that anyone outside my legal team and a handful of close colleagues witnessed. I signed the documents, I shook hands, I went home, ordered food from the Thai place 2 blocks away that I had been going to for 6 years, and ate it at my desk while reading a book I had been meaning to finish for a month. It was a good evening. The industry coverage appeared over the following days. The TechAxis profile that had already done its damage at a bar across the city, and a few others shorter, factual, the kind of coverage that reported the news without editorializing. My name was in them, my photograph, the number in plain text, because numbers have a way of appearing in print regardless of how you feel about them. I did not share any of it. Amanda, I was told by Cassie several weeks later, over coffee, because Cassie had decided to stay in my life, in the specific way that people who have witnessed something important sometimes do. Amanda had apparently spent the week after the bachelorette party in a state of extended social crisis, having been the one to find the article, having been the one to turn the phone around, and therefore having appointed herself both the central figure of the story and its most vocal narrator. She told everyone, Cassie said, wrapping both hands around her mug. At work, at the gym, to her sister. The whole story, how she was the one who found it, how she always had a feeling about you. She thought I probably owed Elena money, I said. Cassie stared at me. She said that to you. She whispered it to Brittany at dinner once, I heard it. Cassie closed her eyes briefly. Amanda has never had a feeling about anything that wasn't handed to her by someone else first. She opened them again. I'm sorry. She's been my friend for a long time, and I love her, but she is exactly who she is. People usually are, I said. Brittany, Cassie told me, had gone quiet in the days after. A different kind of quiet than her usual controlled composure. A quieter quiet. The quiet of a woman who was doing private arithmetic and not liking the results. She had not called Elena. She had not addressed what happened. She had simply retreated into the management of her own life and left the wreckage of her influence where it lay. She knows, Cassie said. She won't say it, but she knows. Good, I said, not with satisfaction exactly, with the plain recognition that consequences finding their way to their correct destinations was simply the world working as it should. Elena, Cassie told me, was doing the slower and more honest work. She had moved out of the apartment we had shared and into a place of her own. She had taken a step back from the circle, not dramatically, not with declarations, but in the quiet and incremental way that people separate from things they have outgrown. She was seeing a therapist, which Cassie said she had started doing not because anyone told her to, but because she had looked at herself clearly and decided she wanted help with what she saw. That, I thought, was the most Elena thing she could have done. Not the mistake. Anyone can make a mistake. The willingness afterward to look at it without blinking. I hoped she found what she was actually looking for, not the performance of it, the thing itself. I thought she might.